speak to the public policy realm in which food, nutrition, and food safety policy is made, and I'll speak largely from my experience at the U.S. Food and Drug Administration from back in the early 90s as Deputy Commissioner for Policy, but more recently in the Obama administration as Deputy Commissioner for Foods and Veterinary Medicine. But I also want to tie this to work that we're doing now focused on food safety capacity building in Africa, and I'm thrilled that Delia Grace from Italy is here, who's a partner on the project we're working on at the Global Food Safety Partnership at the World Bank, and my research partner, Corey Watts, is also here. I think it's fair to say that if you look at what FDA has done over the last couple of decades in the nutrition policy area and also food safety policy area, that most but not all of the major advances really have depended on public-private partnerships. And again, it's collaboration that's working within the particular market system that we live in and through which food is produced and made available to consumers in our country. But it's a market system that is now global and that is beginning, I think, to frame the way in which the composition of the food supply and its safety has been determined even in mid-income and poor countries. And it's just important, I mean, to keep in mind, first of all, very complex landscape. When you boil it down, there are three categories of key actors. There are consumers, of course, who make the demands and say what they want in terms of composition of food, price and availability of food, safety of food. There are food companies who are the ones that make the food. They make it safe or they make it unsafe. They make it nutritious or not. They're the ones that actually deliver the food to people. And then there are governments which set the policy framework that try to bring a public goods overlay to this market interaction in a way that hopefully meets public health needs of the population. So my experience has been that public-private partnerships work in this food and this nutrition and food safety policy realm when you have two things operating. One is that consumers are actually expressing what they want. That is, there's a consumer demand for some public good, whether it's a labeling thing or a food composition issue or a food safety issue. Consumers are voicing what they want. And then there's strategic alignment between the government and the private sector about how to, what that goal is, what is the good that should be delivered to consumers through a public policy process, and alignment on the means for achieving that. And what I want to do is illustrate the way in which those concepts have played out. And just quickly go through a few specific examples of work that FDA has done, again, over the last couple of decades, that illustrate where public-private partnerships work and where they don't. I mentioned the early 90s experience because that's when the Nutrition Labeling and Education Act was passed by Congress, which is the thing that has all the nutrition facts panels on packaged foods. This was a massive regulatory initiative to require for the first time nutrition labeling, to regulate claims that are being made about foods. It was done, though, because the food industry was under consumer pressure to provide information. Before that, there had been no mandatory nutrition information. And so that legislation was passed by Congress, and the rulemaking was done through a truly collaborative public-private effort because there was alignment on goals and means. Fast forwarding to the Obama administration, menu labeling, calorie labeling on restaurant menus, fast food chain restaurant menus was mandated in the Affordable Care Act because the restaurant industry and consumer groups both agreed that the time had come to do that. That's the only reason it happened. Without that industry engagement, we wouldn't have menu labeling. In the last several years, FDA went through a process to update the nutrition facts panel, and one of the controversial issues was whether added sugars should be included on the labels. FDA believed it should. The industry, many of them believed it shouldn't. This was a case where there was no public-private partnership, but FDA prevailed because the science and consumer demand lined up effectively to make it happen. Another couple of examples in the nutrition area, trans fat, FDA did not have a public-private partnership there because the industry in many quarters resisted FDA banning the last remaining uses of oils that contain trans fat, but because of consumer pressure and the primacy of the safety issue there, FDA was able to do that. John mentioned the Food Safety Modernization Act, the overhaul of FDA's food safety program that Congress mandated through legislation passed in 2011. This again was a massive regulatory overhaul, new regulatory requirements, that happened because there was an alignment of strategic goals between consumers and industry and the government that made that happen. And so without the industry engagement politically to get the law passed, to support getting the rules cleared out of OMB, to support the funding, we would never have had the Food Safety Modernization Act happen. I just want to briefly, I know my time is up, but pivot that concept to the IFPRI context in which we're working on a project to look at how food safety capacity building is being done in Africa. And here again, it's just crystal clear to me from the conversations that I've had that in addition to mobilizing government, in addition to mobilizing consumers, the food industry has got to be mobilized and somehow bring its expertise and its weight to bear to strengthen the public sector effort on food safety, to make it politically necessary to elevate the focus on food safety. And so I think a lot of the work ahead, frankly, in Africa on food safety is finding ways to strengthen public-private partnerships. Again, the consumer demand has to be there. It's starting to emerge. But as that continues to strengthen, I think you will see stronger public-private partnerships around food safety in Africa. So.